Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Councilor with the Montgomery County Planning Department. This is a community meeting on the University Boulevard Corridor Plan. This is our third virtual meeting. We've had two in person, three in person, two virtual. This is our third virtual meeting. And this evening is a little bit different from our prior meetings. We're going to really try to do more of a virtual workshop similar to what we did actually last Wednesday evening at Montgomery Planning High School. Along with me, some of the members of the project team, including Zubin is here with me, Jessica McVeigh, the master plan supervisor, Lisa Govoni, our housing planner, as well as Alex, our transportation planner. We also have Bilal Ali, which is who is our research and economic specialist, Chuck Hines with Parks Department, Natasha Fahim, one of our urban designers, and Ms. Carrie Sanders, who is the division chief with the Mid-County Planning Division. So I will talk about 5 to 6 slides or so, and then I'll turn it over to Bilal and to Lisa, and we'll go from there. So we've had, next slide, please. Yes. So we've started actually November of last year in terms of in-person meetings and virtual meetings. These are images that we were shown the last time. And in terms of where we've been, so the next slide will show from the meeting we had March 8th of this year at Northwood High, where we talked about existing rights-of-way conditions along University Boulevard. Alex did an overview of master plan and transportation issues. And then the next slide, which is our most recent in-person meeting, where it was community workshop between Dennis and 495 at the Beltway, sort of looking and listening to what people are asking in terms of community aspirations, issues, etc. Next slide. So going back briefly in terms of some of the rights of way from an overall master plan perspective, so we have a variety of rights of ways along the roadway based on other prior plans that have been on the books now for several decades now. The most recent one coming out from the transit ways and functional master plan that calls for 124-foot right away along University Boulevard. Next slide. And a little bit about the policy guidance that Alex touched on in terms of complete streets. So we're looking at University Boulevard as a complete street. We'll be coming out later this fall with our recommendations in terms of how we believe the University Boulevard should be treated. But in terms of a complete street, we'll be looking to provide better pedestrian accommodation, bikeway accommodations, as well as where future bus rapid transit options should be located within the recommended right-of-way. Next slide. So a bit in terms of where we are in terms of our process. So the image on the screen on the right portion is showing you where we've been in terms of scope of work, pre-scope work, the plan being placed on our work program. So we're beginning now sort of the analysis and sort of visioning aspect, and that's part of the reason why we're doing these sort of community workshops. So, and then the left portion of the screen is giving you our overall sort of timeline. So later this fall, we'll be beginning thinking about our draft recommendations, preliminary recommendations for this project, and then going into next year planning board review, and then more action in terms of county executive review and then county council later. So, so tonight's agenda is focused on 2 items. The first item is Bilal and Lisa will talk about demographic issues and a bit about the sort of economics of the area. Lisa will do an overview regarding housing or where we are along the whole corridor. And then in terms of our virtual sort of meeting workshop, is to really think about for attendees this evening in terms of positive characteristics of the area, in terms of what are some of the challenges, what are some of the weaknesses, things that you can think about today, but also thinking about things for the future in terms of land use, mobility, transportation options, things that you'd like to see. There are a variety of public facilities that are on the roadway, especially parks and public schools, but there's something else you think about that you think we should be thinking about in terms of the long term as we plan for this area. And then obviously some environmental sustainability things. There's obviously we have great assets such as Cycle Creek Parkway, as well as the Northwest Branch area. So we think about what other things this area should be having from an environmental or sustainability perspective. And then the notion at the end to have sort of some group summaries that we will be sort of putting together. So our rest of the project team will be using the Jamboard to collect and disseminate the different comments that we're hearing. If you could put your questions or comments into the Q&A function, would be fabulous. And I think Zubin, I think the next slide will be Bilal, correct? Yes. So
yeah.
I will turn things over to Bilal, who will take it away from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nkosi. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm just going to describe a little bit about some demographic existing conditions that we've researched into the, for the plan area, just trying to define who lives here, just to get a sense of some, what the status quo is basically. So there are about 9,700 residents within the plan boundary itself. So within the black dotted line there. We did look a little bit also to see what that context is within the surrounding neighborhoods as defined by block groups. And so that's about 10,000 residents out of maybe 30,000 in the neighborhood surrounding it as defined by the census. The median age within the plan area is about 40 years. And it's a relatively diverse area that kind of reflects the racial and ethnic diversity of the county, although it's slightly more, has a slightly larger share of Hispanic and Latino residents and a slightly larger share of Black African American residents. And it's predominantly an owner household area because there are mostly single family homes. And then of course, there are some of the larger apartment buildings that we know exist along the boulevard itself. Just wanted to look a little more closely at the age distribution. It's actually remarkably similar to the county, with the main difference being among older residents. So there's a larger share of seniors in the plan area compared to the county, and there are, I think, some senior living facilities within the plan area that might be skewing some of those numbers. In terms of household growth, this is where this plan area becomes somewhat unique compared to surrounding areas. So because there's been no household growth, there's been no new housing developments, no new apartment buildings. There hasn't been a change in households that's other than a few, vacant houses being absorbed. Compare that to the surrounding geographies of Silver Spring and Wheaton, and you can see how there was, a significant amount of development on the edges of the plan area, but this plan area since 2010 kind of missed out on that growth. And as a result, the average household size that you see on the right of your screen, 2.72, is higher than it was in 2010 because there was some population growth, but the households didn't grow, so the households got bigger. And so now the average household size resembles that of the county overall. In terms of tenure, as I noted, this is predominantly an owner-occupied area, which is in contrast to Silver Spring, which is to the south, but similar to Wheaton in the county. But again, uniquely within this plan area, because there was no household growth and there was some relative affordability that Lisa will touch on, there was a significant increase in the number of owner households and therefore actually a net decline in the share of renter households in the area. So this place is predominantly owner occupied, but it's more so than it was in 2010. Diving into the income distribution a little bit, you can see that the plan area has a similar income distribution to Silver Spring and Wheaton, which makes sense. It's sort of surrounded by those two areas at either end. Interestingly, the household income is slightly higher than in Silver Spring, but because the plan area has a larger household size, the per capita income is slightly lower, but they're more or less in line. But all three areas in this sort of general region is slightly lagging the county in terms of income distribution overall. Looking at housing prices, you can see where this affordability, sort of the scale of this affordability, the median sale price in the plan area in 2022 was $585,000 for a single family home and $453,000 for a townhome. Compared it to North Bethesda, just to give a sense of what a higher end market looks like in terms of order of magnitude more than this area. And you can see it's also much higher than in Silver Spring, which is obviously nearby. So there is some relative affordability here, although it's important to point out that a household earning the median household income for the plan area, $103,000, would not necessarily be able to afford a $585,000 homes if they spent only 30% of their income on housing costs, which is sort of the Housing and Urban Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development sort of met threshold for affordability. So it's still somewhat unaffordable. Looking now at commercial development, you can see that the area more or less was developed by the year 2000, mostly developed by 1980, in fact, and there's been very limited commercial development since. And again, that actually really does follow the lack of household growth too in this area. It's not just that since 2010, before then, there was also a lack of household growth. So the lack of spending contributes to the lack of ability to sort of capture more spending and therefore support more retail. And you can see here that in fact the commercial development on the right, which doesn't include the multifamily buildings, which count as commercial development, retail is only 9.5% of all the sort of commercial development in the plan area, with just under 1 million square feet, and that includes Four Corners. However, the retail that does exist is in high demand. So it's relatively small, but the vacancy rate is low. And so what exists is in demand, and the vacancy rate is following that of the county in terms of trends, but lower overall. So there is demand. And so if there was an increase in household incomes or an increase in spending ability with more households, that would lead to supporting more retail development in the area. And so just trying to sort of paint the picture of the market there. I think so basically the key takeaways are more or less it's similar to the plan area in terms of demographics, although it's slightly more diverse and has lower household incomes. There's been no housing development, but also no commercial development, although the surrounding areas have grown. So there may be some potential for some of that to influence the potential for this area. But it's important to understand that this is, again, like I said, in the context of relatively significant growth at either end. And so in order to support redevelopment or more retail, more sort of dynamic type of development within the plan boundary, you'd have to see some household growth in order to support that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa. I work on housing policy for the planning department, and I want to kind of walk through some policy guidance that we're going to look at for housing, and also some existing conditions about how many units, what type of units, etc. So to kind of frame this conversation, a lot of the existing housing policy guidance that will guide the housing work in the University Boulevard Plan is the idea that the county has a supply and affordability crisis. And what that means in terms of solutions is that we need to take a more of everything approach to housing. And that means we need more types of housing, more housing in more places, and housing that's generally more affordable and attainable to the people that live there. So looking at this map of land uses in the plan area, this is every parcel in the plan area, and the color signifies what type of use that exists on that parcel. We're going to be talking about the yellow and brown areas of this map that signify housing. So to start at a very basic level, there's about 3,400 housing units in the plan area. The plan, go back one slide. The plan contains a range of housing types, including detached units, a small amount of attached units, and multifamily housing. As Bilal mentioned, the area is generally characterized as by its general affordability compared to the county in both sales prices and rents, but also in terms of the large amount of housing stock that is income restricted. Income restricted affordable housing is housing that has a restriction on the unit or the occupant that limits who can live in that unit based on income as the qualifier. Usually the rents in these income restricted units, they're lower than market rents, and these units are occupied by low and moderate income households. So next slide. So this is a map of all the parcels outlined in blue. They're single family detached units in the plan area, and there's about 1,700 of them, and they're spread out, as you can see, throughout the plan area. The detached housing stock is older, comparable to other nearby neighborhoods. Most of the units, the detached units, were built in the 50s, like I said, like similar neighborhoods nearby. Next slide. So there's about a smaller number of attached units, about 340. These units are a little bit newer than the detached housing stock. They tend to be built in the 80s. And what's an interesting factoid is about 24 of those units are in a single family attached rental community called Pomader Court. And those are mostly income restricted affordable rental units, townhouse style, that are owned by the county's housing authority, the Housing Opportunities Commission. And one thing we're going to be talking about throughout the plan as we work with the community to develop recommendations is ways to preserve affordability and preserve those income restricted units. So moving on to multifamily, there's about 1,300 multifamily units in the plan area. There's 4 multifamily rental buildings and 1 condominium building. These units were primarily built in the 60s. You know, Bilal mentioned earlier that there really hasn't been new multifamily development in the plan area in decades. And over 400 of these multifamily units, they're seniors or special needs housing, like Inwood House or Colwood Towers or the Oaks at Four Corner. And over 350 units of the multifamily are income restricted, which is about 26% of the housing stock, which is really great and something that we'll want to preserve in the plan. They're income restricted through a variety of affordable housing programs. The most common in the county is the moderately priced dwelling unit ordinance, which is a mandatory set aside for affordable housing in new development that 12.5% to 15% needs to be affordable to moderate income households. The other second most popular affordable housing program is the low income housing tax credit program, which is a federally funded state administered program that provides funding for the development of low income housing. Next slide. So we're looking at the rents in the plan area. As you can see, the rents in the UBC plan area have generally been flat for the past 10 years. And the rents are generally also lower than the county rents by about 20%. The average rent in the UBC plan area is around $1,664 compared to $1,995 in the county. But again, there's a very small sample size. There's only 5 rental buildings, and there is a large amount of income restricted affordable housing. And the multifamily is older, so those are factors that are helping keep the rents down. Next slide. The multifamily vacancy rate, while it's currently higher than the county's vacancy rate, that's 5%, it's generally healthy at 6.3%. You'll see one outlier in 2021, and we think that was due to the single property likely undergoing renovation, so many of the units were vacant. That's what happens when you have a very small sample size of only 5 rental buildings. But next slide. So, wrapping this all up, we're very early in this plan, but when we talk about housing in the University Boulevard Corridor Plan, we're going to be exploring different aspects of housing to help guide our recommendations, along with help from the community. And these are a lot come from the recently passed general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. And these are just some of the policies that we're going to be exploring. Expanding opportunities for density, especially along major corridors and locations that can help assist with the development of complete communities. And complete communities is this idea grounded in the concept of 15-minute living, which seeks to locate services and amenities that are feasible within walking distance of a center of a neighborhood to help serve the daily needs of people who live or work within walking or biking distance. And we really think that the University Boulevard community, it has a lot of amenities, it has a lot of great things going for it, and we want to, if we can, improve that access and amenities. We're also looking for ways to both preserve and increase the number of income-restricted affordable housing units, especially for low and moderate income households. Like I mentioned, there's 26% of the rental stock is affordable, which is great, but sometimes those units expire and we need to be proactive in keeping those units in the county's inventory. We also want to explore potentially ways to support more housing options. This includes missing middle, which is things like townhouses or small apartment buildings or duplexes, but also ideas like shared housing, cooperative housing, co-housing, live-work units, and accessory dwelling units. And that's really to help meet the housing needs and diversify housing options. And we also want to explore policies like co-location to help boost housing protection for both market rate and affordable housing. With that, I think I'm turning it back over.
Thanks, Lisa and Bilal. So we've done both in-person and virtual meetings, and we also started a while back having our website as another tool to provide public comments. And so far, we received a lot of really great comments and recommendations that are sort of .org/UBC. And on the interactive map, you're able to get in there and provide specific comments on ideas and proposals you have. So we've had comments you could see on the screen. Hard because the text is small, but we've had recommendations in that area. We also have provided an additional and bikeways community to go to the website and use this tool. We definitely want to encourage you to look at it and use it as another way to have your voice heard, and your recommendations, something that we could pick up and have part of in the chat for everyone. So next slide. Next slide, please.
This is the next public meeting slide. Do you want the next slide after this?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I know my Wi-Fi may be going in and out, so apologies. In terms of update tonight is the virtual meeting. Could you go back to the next one? Bilal, could you go back to the next slide?
Is it the public meeting slide?
That one, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That one, that's great. So we've had having this meeting this evening. We have the last one. Yes, thank you. So we've had the in-person meeting last Wednesday. Tonight is the virtual. They're all mirror meetings. So we're going to go back again in person at the planning department May 17th, 7 to 9 p.m. And we're really going to focus on the area in yellow. That's Dennis going into Amherst. And then we'll follow that again with another virtual meeting May 24th from 7 to 9 as well. Next slide. There's a website contact information for myself and Zubin. You can always email, call us, as well as our website. As I noted, we have this presentation, prior presentations, all will be up there. And then next slide. So again, tonight's agenda really is trying to figure out positive characteristics, challenges, opportunities on land use. Could be transportation, mobility, public facilities, environment, sustainability as a broad sort of categories, sort of focus within the area shown in blue on the map. Next slide.
Sorry, everybody. Zubin, do you want to? I think Kosi, I think he's back.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we have like 3 slides here that are showing these are aerials. These are aerials that we had at the table last Wednesday evening at the various tables at Blair High. That sort of show the area from a high level. You could see obviously University Boulevard, the Beltway, the area in red. That is the plan area boundary, and some of the key properties within this area are called out, including the St. Bernadette, Pinecrest, as well as Blair High. Next slide. All right, the next slide is here and is really focused on the Four Corners area where you can see Woodmore Shopping Center, the Safeway, the post office, some of the key landmarks, 7-Eleven there, right at the intersection of 29 and University Boulevard. And again, the red line shown on the map is the plan area boundary. And then the final slide here is between Dennis and Lorraine Avenue and North Four Corners, Local Park, the Oaks at Four Corners, Collins Funeral Home, some of the key landmarks that are highlighted here. And again, the red line is the plan area boundary. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zubin and the rest of the team regarding our virtual workshop this evening.
Thank you, Nkosi. Before we get started with the workshop, I want to again reiterate, we have the interactive tool, which I copied in the chat. I think it's an exciting little tool that anyone can use. If you think of something along the plan area that you have an idea, you have a concern, please share it with us. I'm also going to copy a link for our ongoing survey, and we have gotten some very good responses. So we have kept the survey going. So again, share your thoughts with us, and we definitely want to hear from you. So, and what you can see on your screens right now is our Jamboard. So the way we are hoping this will work is we'll use the Q&A session link that you see on your screens, or the Q&A button that you see, as a place where you can share your ideas, and then staff will of course copy those ideas, and then you'll see them populated onto the Jamboard. And the goal here, of course, is to sort of get local insight into the plan area from you, the residents. So the Jamboard has different panels or boards, and Bilal, we can maybe cycle through them. If you can see, we have different questions that we want to ask you. So we have noticed that transportation kind of dominates this plan area, the conversation, when we did it in person. So we'll get there, but we request you to kind of hold your thoughts on that one a little bit. And maybe we can start with what do you like today in your neighborhood? So feel free to use the Q&A session button to add your thoughts about what you like about your neighborhood. And then, we'll just cycle through these Jamboards and collect your thoughts. So looking forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you. And while you think about that, maybe we can share a few things that we heard in the in-person meeting. There were a lot of conversations about how strong and robust the community is. People like their neighbors and the neighborhoods in general. The access to amenities, such as parks and trails, was highlighted by some people. There were also people who said that it was easy to, sort of get in and out of the area, not necessarily, getting to the area from like places might be hard. But yeah, we are starting to see some comments. And you'll, once you see that, you'll see some of that populated onto the Jamboard. So while that happens, I can see like it's a welcoming place. And unpretentious, diverse group of people who grew up around the country and the world. Yeah, someone also mentioned this, it's easy to walk and bike to lots of parks and playgrounds. So yeah, we definitely heard that even in our in-person sessions. I think scant praise for the area from this crowd. So it's any other thoughts? Any staff remember things that people highlighted when we met them in person? Jessica, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Echoing one of the comments that we received is, one thing that we heard last week in the in-person meeting was really valuing the parks and open spaces and the trail connections that are along the corridor.
I apologize for my voice. I'm just getting over a cold, but one of the other, the table that I sat at, one of the comments was that it was actually very easy. We had the meeting at Blair High School, and that they said that there were challenges in walking and crossing the street, but that they actually found it very easy to get to Blair High School from other parts of the county by transit.
Yeah, we were and Kosi and I were in a meeting in one of the multifamily homes recently, and they also elevated the fact that public transit is at least available. Of course, I might add that they were comparing it to Alabama, so take it with a pinch of salt.
I think last week we also heard some praise for Woodmore Shopping Center, diverse retail options and heavily utilized by the community, including the students, and convenient access for them. So
yeah, I think this is a good time to move on to the next panel, Bilal. We kind of want to hear from you about the land use in the plan area and what types of buildings or new construction would you like to see in your neighborhood? Any existing structures which could use improvement, and what community landmarks, and again, just as Bilal pointed out, Woodmore might be one of them, buildings, sort of places, schools, trees even, are important to you.
As an example, one of the things that came up a lot at the in-person meeting last week was improvements to the existing post office. That's a really important place, but it could really use some improvements, particularly in terms of access, just in case that spurs any thoughts for folks.
Some of the conversations about the presence of the education institutions was also important. The fact that you can find education at all levels for children, from like pre-K through high school, and then potentially access to places of higher education in the region along University Boulevard is also something that was highlighted. But yeah, we would love to hear from you. And if you're having any tech issues in terms of getting the Q&A thing, it should be at the bottom of your screen, and it just says Q&A. So if you can find it there. If you're more comfortable sort of speaking it, I'm happy to unmute you. You can just raise your hand, and if typing is not the preferred method. I think maybe what we can do is to sort of spark the conversation more. Bilal, can you cycle through some of the questions? Maybe just introduce the panels, and I think we can have it be a little more kind of freewheeling conversation, and feel free to just share your thoughts about the plan area in general, the concerns that you have, and then staff can populate the Jamboard, and we'll cycle back and forth between these panels. So as mentioned, as Nkosi mentioned earlier, we have, we want to hear your thoughts about land use, public facilities, of course, and then environment and sustainability, if you have any concerns in your neighborhood, and then finally, questions about mobility and transportation. What are the mobility and transportation issues affecting you right now? And what kind of a street is desirable for you?
And see, what I would just add to that, really, we're interested to hear anything that you'd like to share with us tonight in terms of your experience living, working, traveling, playing along this corridor. If you want to share with us some strengths or weaknesses that you experience in your daily life, or challenges that you encounter this is really an opportunity for us to try to hear from you, either, in words through the Q&A, or if you do want to raise your hand and Zubin can unmute you. Really, we're hoping to kind of hear from you all as the local experts for this area in your community.
I see a comment about we're happy with our neighborhood the way it is. So.
So I think there's a comment on the mobility Jamboard.
Yeah, there's comment about like it would be nice to see the I-495 overpass bridge reflect shared use path safety separation, so including for kids walking from Blair. So yeah, the walkability to and from Blair is definitely being elevated here too. And somebody else points out that the Beltway crossing at Colesville is outside your boundary, but crossing on the sidewalks there to walk to and from Four Corners from neighborhoods south of the Beltway can be pretty scary. Only a question if you're able to address the issue. Jessica or Nkosi, Alex, do you want to take a look at this?
Sure. Thank you for that comment, and maybe I can kick us off and get us started, and then ask Nkosi or Alex to weigh in on this as well. Yes, this crossing is certainly one of the very challenging ones, and when we think about the idea of complete communities that Lisa referred to in her presentation, it makes it hard to have a complete community, through the retail, the services, the amenities, the options that are available at Four Corners if it's hard to walk there. And so we will be looking at, through this planning process, opportunities to improve crossings and conditions for those, walking, rolling, biking, and so that's certainly one of the things that we're thinking about. I think at this specific stage, we're really trying to identify what the issues are, such as this one, and that will allow us over the coming months to think through some options for how we might develop recommendations that could hopefully address some of these issues.
Yeah, any thoughts on the environment, sustainability issues in the area? Do you have concerns about the environment in your neighborhood? And are there any environmental or sustainability issues that you would like elevated, improved upon in the neighborhood?
The person that added, we're happy with our neighborhood the way it is. We'd love to hear a little bit more about what those elements are that that you really love about your neighborhood.
One issue I think that came up, or something that people had a lot of ideas about, I think certainly at the last meeting, was the middle of the intersection at Four Corners with the McDonald's. Wonder if anybody has any ideas.
Yeah, there's a comment here about that, which is it's difficult to walk to different businesses and bus stops around the Four Corners Woodmore. Too many lanes to cross, too much traffic. And the person highlights what we heard a lot in the in-person meeting too, which is it's not even easy to get from business to business by car. So yeah, when we had the in-person meeting, people had a lot of ideas about what could be done to improve the area. And one thing that was sort of one of the more sort of sophisticated solutions that came up at our table was the thought of having a more traditional grid around this area was brought up by some residents, because they recognize that they haven't seen intersections like this, in spite of people having, as somebody had pointed out, that this region hosts people from all over the country and the world. But many people pointed out that they hadn't seen anything like this anywhere. So yeah, I think we don't want to restrict you to sort of these topic areas. These are things we definitely want to hear about. But if there's something else you want to share, you would like the plan as it develops to address, feel free to elevate it in the chat, in the Q&A session, or as we said, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you for a conversation. So So for those who did join the meeting, I'm sure you had like some thoughts that you wanted to share, or reasons why you wanted to join this meeting. If you can, sort of think about that and share the ideas, that'd be fantastic. And since we do have the time, if you have any questions about the presentation you saw earlier too, we are happy to answer that, and we can always pull up one of those slides if there were specific questions about something you saw or something that piqued your interest in the presentation that Nkosi, Bilal, and Lisa made earlier. I think there were some comments in the in-person conversations that we had the community about the parks in the area and the lack of facilities that could be used by people. Do people have thoughts about the parks? or if you would like to see any new facilities be in your area. Is this something that you have to travel too far to access, whether it's a recreation center or a swimming pool or something like that? That way, as we
meeting.
Sorry.
This is Chuck Hines at the in-person.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, at the in-person meeting last week, there was a question about the park activity building in the North Four Corners local park and why that's being rented to a private entity. And the reason why is because about 15 years ago, our department analyzed the use of all the park activity buildings around the county and determined which ones were underutilized at that time. And the North Four Corners local park was one of the ones that was identified as underutilized in terms of permitting people who are renting it for birthday parties or whatever. So they opened that center up to a RFP or request for proposals from the community about potential uses for that park activity building. So it ended up being rented long-term for whatever use it is. I think it's a preschool or daycare center or school or something now.
Chuck, building on that, that's a good reminder that tomorrow night at the North Four Corners Park, there is also an event, a community event with music, and we'll be there looking forward to talking to folks in the community about these same questions. And you know, so I guess that's another thing to think about is like, what level of, is it the right level of activation in your community? Are you seeing enough, you know, events and festivals and opportunities to really kind of engage with your neighbors and, you know, really just have that social space to be together?
Yeah, and I'll make sure to copy the event link in the chat for everyone. So if you're not already going to be there, some of us are going to be there representing the plan and the planning department. So if you're shy about having these conversations here, come and talk to us at the event. So,
Ruben, there's a question in the chat.
oh, go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
I think it's for Bilal. So it's a. I wasn't sure if you could see the chat, Bilal.
Yeah, I can see it. I can take this. Yeah, no, it's a great question. It does seem, you know, counterintuitive. I guess because it's a small amount, it is a low vacancy rate, but it's also not, you know, a zero, and it is reflecting a relatively small inventory. And it's really the size of the inventory that's reflecting the overall spending power. The fact that it's got low vacancy means that it matches the supply really does match up with the demand quite neatly. But it would be difficult to add significant retail development because, you know, typically new retail development is going to either come as part of a new mixed use development or at minimum within a strip retail or something, you know, it's sort of a larger scale than a few more retail pads for a business. And so in order to be able to support that larger scale of development that developers would want to build more new retail, they would need to be able to justify it by you know, being able to assume more spending in the area, whether that's through new households or rising incomes or what have you. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and there's also a comment about the need for easier walkability and bikeability from University Boulevard to North Four Corners local park. And yeah, Chuck, there's a comment here about like should have public bathrooms and working water fountains. So.
Okay, thank you. Whoever put in the comment that it needs to be easier to cross University Boulevard or North Four Corners, I'm wondering what you have in mind. I believe there's already a fairly prominent crosswalk there. So are you suggesting you want a signal there or some other treatment?
Yeah. There's also another comment about the desire to see street festivals, farmers markets in Four Corners, but it needs to be easily accessible. There needs to be an easily accessible community square for this. So, and that potentially could be North Four Corners Local Park. And yeah, this also came up often in the in-person meeting where the way I kind of translate it is there's a sense of community here, but missing is a sense of place. So there is some potential to have a more robust sense of place. And for this portion of the plan, as a resident points out, it could be North Four Corners Local Park. Alex, do you want to take up the question of about access to the local park?
Sure, yeah. And I appreciate that comment. I agree with Chuck mentioned that there's a marked crossing there, but totally understand the challenge of trying to cross 6 lanes of traffic where there's no traffic control. So can totally understand why that's a challenge, and definitely something we'll be looking into. If there are thoughts from the group here tonight about what would help, I think some things we could think about are looking into a signal or a pedestrian hybrid beacon where you can press a button and get a red light for the traffic so that pedestrians can cross there while the traffic is stopped. And then I saw another question about the conclusions that our team drew from the TAP event, in which folks suggested transportation changes that could be made. As I think Nkosi mentioned earlier, we're still very much in the kind of visioning stage and then starting to formulate our recommendations. And so we haven't drawn any conclusions yet, but I think some of the interesting ideas that came out of that TAP were, among other things, thinking about dedicated transit lanes along University Boulevard. And then also some folks have also mentioned this idea of more of a street grid, or kind of changing the traffic pattern through Four Corners so that it's no longer separated into 2 one-way pairs, but actually becomes more of a conventional street grid. And interestingly, that was something that we heard come up in the in-person meeting last week as well. So just wanted to share that. But yeah, definitely good to be continuing to get more good ideas. We haven't drawn any conclusions yet at this point, but are excited to hear interest in and some good ideas for the area.
There's a question in the chat about the conclusions your team drew from the TAP event. For those who don't know, we had a Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel where regional technical assistants, gave us some ideas as we were starting the plan, and they also wrote a report, which I think will be available soon for review. So maybe Jessica or Carrie and Nkosi, you would like to take up this question?
Well, the TAP is a great sort of a variety of ideas coming together, bringing distinguished professionals in the region to give us things to consider. So as we later this year start to develop our recommendations, there may be some overlap with some of those thoughts from the technical assistance panel, and there's some other ideas that they did not consider that we may want to delve into and become part of our recommendations for the draft plan that we'll be putting together. So the tab panel really gives us a lot of good things to think about, like, for example, 4 corners, and we're going to be doing a bit more of a deeper exploration on that with some help from a consultant group to really understand what are the variety of options that we could consider in terms of mobility, but also pedestrian safety. So I think pedestrian safety is going to be should be one of the hallmarks of our work for University Boulevard, given the multiple communities that are serving the roadway and some of the specialized communities on the roadway. I think anything that we could advance as part of this effort, along with our implementation partners, Montgomery more successful than it is today. So just to go back briefly on the sort of notion of festivals, etc., I think one of the things that we're probably going to address in this plan is providing at least some recommendations regarding placemaking, something that's a department that we've been doing. We've done stuff in Fairland, things in North Bethesda, the White Flint 2 area. So that's would be something that we'll be looking and exploring as part of our recommendations moving forward.
There's a comment here about the hybrid beacon that we have along University Boulevard. Alex, I'm wondering if you can sort of elevate that comment and maybe respond to it.
Yeah, thank you. So the comment was unsignalized crosswalk is not safe to use. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the other one. There was another comment that was that there's a hybrid beacon nearby to the park, but cars often run the red light since there's no risk of getting hit. I guess I'm reading that as no risk of getting hit by other vehicles, although hopefully folks acknowledge the risk of hitting a pedestrian who's riding across the street there. So yeah, don't know how this can be improved. Red light cameras. Yeah, that's a good question. I think this was sort of a step toward trying to improve that crossing location. The other crossing location that we spoke about right at Four Corners Park doesn't have any sort of signalization, so it's even more difficult to cross. But I understand the frustration of folks not stopping for the pedestrian hybrid beacon. And so the way those work, I'm sure folks in the area are familiar, but a pedestrian presses the button, the signal turns to yellow, just like a traffic signal, and then we'll go to a full red to indicate that the traffic should stop. But yeah, I think safety enforcement cameras, there is precedent in Montgomery County for red light safety cameras. I'm not sure if those apply to pedestrian hybrid beacons as well, but that's certainly something we can look into at this location.
And
the question in chat about zoning, so yes, we'll have zoning recommendations. Even if we don't do any zoning changes, there will be, based on the 2014 countywide district map amendment, there's some zones that will have to change, and that's, for example, the planned development zone or PD zone properties. That's the property adjacent to WTOP, right across the street, and the one that's also on the same side of WTOP. That's in the planned development zone, as well as the townhouse zones, those properties that are townhouses that are was zoned as residential townhouse, either at 8 units to the acre or 10 units to the acre. So those are properties that we have to change because the ordinance requires us to do it when we're working on a plan. And then it comes into like where other places we're going to be thinking about zoning changes. That's additional work we still need to do, but we will we'll sort of be focused and targeted regarding where those potential new zones may land.
yeah, thanks, Nkosi. There's a comment here about in general, I see this area as a through route to Wheaton or to Four Corners, the Beltway. It's pretty boring to drive. It's just tons of single family houses among University Boulevard. So my concerns are mostly around transportation, transit, roads, etc., and beautifying the roads. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I think, Alex, in one of your presentations, we saw how the sort of, making this into a boulevard is a point that you have raised before. So if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Subin. I agree with some of the place challenges of the just adjacent single family homes, and hopefully that's also an acknowledgement that there are folks who are living in those homes and who are wanting to travel around in their community, and in addition to the folks who are traveling through. But I think part of the idea of University Boulevard as a boulevard, and not just as a through route for cars, is thinking about it more multimodally. And Kosi mentioned earlier the complete streets policy in the county that really emphasizes safe and convenient travel for all users, regardless of mode. So that's including people who are walking, biking, taking transit, and driving along the corridor. And so I think the idea would be to try to make this serve multiple purposes, both as a way for folks to travel east-west through the county, but also locally serving the folks who live and work in the community.
Thanks, Alex. Any other questions, concerns? In some cases, we don't see your name, so we may not call you out because I see only anonymous attendees. So if I don't call you out by name, it's for that. And I also want to respect people's privacy on that front. So the person who raised this question about about transportation, transit, roads, and beautifying the roads, I appreciate you elevating that. So if you have any more thoughts on that, of what could be done, what should be done. In our in-person meeting, we heard a lot about, potentially adding trees. There was support for trees and wider sidewalks in general. So if you have specific comments about, or even about specific streets and specific intersections, which you find challenging, or where you think there is some potentially low-hanging fruit to be plucked, like a curb cut would make all the difference to somebody, you can also put that in the chat, and we'll make sure to add it to the boards. There's an interesting comment here, and I'm sure somebody's adding it to the Jamboard right now, but the person says there's a request, not a question, based on my earlier comment. If the plan boundaries are not currently set in stone, I would urge you to expand them to include Beltway, the Colesville intersection, pedestrian crossings. Navigating those exit ramps is a dangerous disincentive to communities south of the Beltway wishing to access services at Four Corners by foot or bicycle. So Nkosi, Jessica, maybe you're more suited to answer these questions about the boundaries and what we can do about this particular case.
Well, on the boundary, the planning board has sort of endorsed the boundary that we proposed. That was done early this year. However, that does not mean that we cannot address the issue. We can address it as part of this plan, as well as the work of our colleagues are doing as part of the Silver Spring Communities effort, which will include essentially the area south of the Beltway. So I think in conjunction with our work, as well as the work that will be coming up later this year, so our colleagues in the down county area, that's the area south of Beltway. They'll have an auto, and them I think will be able to address the area along the Beltway and Colesville. Jessica, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, Nkosi, I think that's a good summary. Thank you.
All right. I think the questions and the comments are sort of winding down a little bit. So I don't necessarily want to keep everyone here for the full length of the proposed meeting, but I do want to sort of have a final question. If there's one thing to make your community better, what would it be? If you want to just highlight that, if sort of monarch for a day, if you'd like to change something, what would you change? We do have one comment here, which is, in general, I like the TAP ideas in terms of adding trees and shared use paths and making University Boulevard a nice place to drive and bike and walk. As a novice biker, I really don't feel safe walking or biking, especially with kids, to Wheaton, unless they are separated from drivers. So yeah, that's a very good point. And again, this is something we also heard in our in-person meeting. So, but yeah, again, as we close, if you have that sort of one big idea that you would like to share or would like us to consider, ponder, then please type that in. And again, if you want to just say it out loud, then I'll be happy to unmute you.
I would also ask the group attendees this evening if there's any, like, as part of this plan, we'll think about historic resources. Are there any areas at this part of University Boulevard that you believe would warrant historic endorsement or protection? Just something else to consider as we think about, important community landmarks, and our historic colleagues will be exploring what we could recommend as part of this plan. So you may not have a response this evening, but just let us know in terms of something that you may value as a community and you'd love to have it protected. And that could be protected two ways, either through the master plan, putting it on the master plan for historic resources, or the first step is the locational atlas listing, which this effort as part of the University Boulevard Corridor, that's something that we could do as part of our work here. So just consider that as well as something that's important to the community.
Thanks, Nkosi. We see one sort of big idea here in the chat about like safe sidewalks, the need to keep them in good shape and get rid of telephone poles that have been installed on the pedestrian right-of-way. So thank you for that. All right, let's give it a couple of more minutes. Any closing thoughts from the panel, from planning staff? Chuck?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than someone inquired about whether the North Four Corners local park could be used for farmers markets or other events for the community. And I will certainly follow up with our parks activation team to find out what's possible. As Jessica already mentioned, there will be an event there tomorrow night, the Acoustics and Ale, or whatever it's called. There will be an event in the park tomorrow night, and I encourage you to attend.
Thanks, Chuck. There's one more comment here about the need for wider sidewalks buffered from high-speed vehicles. Thank you. With that, I think we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for those who could attend. We really appreciate this.
Zubin, I might
Oh,
add
yeah.
one quick thing to say that this isn't your last opportunity to engage and to share your ideas and thoughts on these questions that we're asking tonight. You know, if you sort of walk away from this meeting and you're like, wow, I really wish that I would have said this, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And I don't know if you guys could go back to the presentation with the contact information, or maybe we could drop that in the chat, so that if people do have things that they want to share or provide or just talk to us about, our door is open, and we'd love to hear from you. And you know, so that's tomorrow night. We'll be out in the community, and we are also hosting 2 similar meetings for the stretch from Dennis to Amherst Avenue on May 17th at the Wheaton headquarters and May 24th virtually. So if you know, if your neighbors live in that area, or you have friends that live in that area, or if you just want to come share thoughts specific to that area, we would welcome them. The format will be similar to tonight. The in-person, you know, we'll have these type of visioning questions related to that area of the plan, and then we'll have a virtual component as well. So tonight isn't your last chance. Please do let us know your thoughts, you know, in the format that works best for you.
Yeah, we also have one final comment before we go, which is, please do talk to your colleagues working on the Silver Spring plan. Please don't make the Beltway / Colesville intersection into a no man's land, and do include SHA on any conversations. The parenthetical note is that you probably have to anyway. So yes, we do, and we will. But thank you again. I'm going to just respond to a quick question in chat here, and then we'll adjourn. So. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, and everyone who showed up. Much appreciated. And we hope to see you at the next one.